Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sasha Parrish. I'm the Center of Excellence Manager here at Diversity MBA, and I'm here with all of our lovely panelists for our Cultural Smart Series webinar panel, Being Asian in America. I'm going to hand it off soon to our host, Amy Yip, who is a mental fitness coach, author, and TEDx speaker. But before I do, I want to let everyone know that not only will we have this panel available to you all as a recording after the fact, we will also be hosting another Smart Series cultural webinar panel on June 26th, being LGBTQIA in America, and we hope to see you all there. Thank you. Amy, over to you. You're muted, Amy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Yip. I'm the CEO of Amy Yip LLC, and we're the experts in closing the leadership skills gap. So companies have the right leaders right now. And as Sasha mentioned, I am an author of the book Unfinished Business, Breaking Down the Great Wall Between Adult Child and Immigrant Parents. So this topic is very top of mind and exciting for me. I'm excited to be facilitating this conversation on being Asian in America with these three fantastic panelists. So we have James Chang, Global Senior Director and Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Zimmer Biomet. We've got Sue-Ann Hong, President and CEO of the Center for Asian Pacific American Women. And we also have Patricia Ratulangi, VP of Global Communications at Nielsen. So I want to hand it over to each of our panelists to provide a brief introduction themselves. Patricia.
Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you everybody for being here today to join this very exciting conversation. And I'm so excited to be a part of this panel. So, Patricia Ratulangi, I am now with Nielsen IQ. I lead global communications, and that means I talk about all the research that we have and the data that we have around consumers, whatever we watch, whatever we buy, and how that informs how brands, how people, and how media connect across the board. And I'm very proud to represent also our insights around Asian consumers as well. Over to you, James.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is James Chang. As mentioned earlier, I've been in the space of DEI for getting close to 2 decades. And when it comes to this work, I've been doing this in multiple industries, not limited to the current organization I'm in. And one of the things I would say a little bit of why this specific journey has been interesting and how it impacts my leadership style. One of the things that when it comes to doing DEI work, it's one of those things that is able to be weaved across entire organizations. So a little bit of where that comes from is again coming from everything from pharma, medtech, early supply chain, ag, and otherwise multiple industries. So a little highlight from me. Sue, on to you.
Thank you so much. Again, everyone, welcome and thank you so much to Pamela McIlvaine for hosting this great space for us to have this important conversation. I was in corporate America working for a Fortune 50 company for almost 28 years. And then I switched over back in 2018 to the nonprofit space. And I got to tell you, it's been pretty humbling experience because now I'm the CEO and the janitor of my organization. It's a one-person band with lots of contract employees as well as, volunteers. And I'm very humbled by the work in our community. So I'm looking forward to sharing more. But my background is heavy people development, customer service, and really driving relationships that are trusting so that we can deliver on results. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. So I have so many questions for our panelists, and we'll dive right in. And for those of you in the audience, if you have questions at any point, go ahead, drop it into the Q&A function, and we'll save time towards the end to get to as many of your questions as we can. So let's start with a question for James around navigating professional spaces. Asian Americans often face stereotypes like the model minority myth, which can really impact career progression and workplace dynamics. How have you personally navigated these challenges in your respective field, and what strategies can help others break through systemic barriers?
Absolutely. So for right off the bat, I want to highlight the three things I always tell people to remember when it comes to navigating as an individual, let alone the culture that you come from, and also carry. Because there's a difference when you carry certain things and certain things that you come from. So with that, first and foremost, courage. Having courage to be yourself and go after what you want is number one. If you don't have that, it's going to be your biggest challenge. And it only leads into the stereotypes. Secondly, communication. You have to communicate who you are, what you want, and what you need. That's critical to break that stereotype because, again, before people assume, you have to actually be out there. And so people know who you are. So it's important to communicate consistently. And then the third component is commit. You have to commit to what you want and you have to pursue it regardless of what type of labels people put on you. And in my career, I've been in well over 12 plus different roles throughout my career before I reached DEI. I've been in IT, I've been in operations, I've been in sales. What I've come to realize is that in any area, people are going to have labels for you, whether it's tied specifically to the culture, whether it's based upon your background or your professional interests. But at the end of the day, it's a narrative. And whether you choose to let someone control your narrative is the problem. So that's why I said communicate is a critical one. So when it comes to the myth, it's there. I don't try to fight it. I don't try to worry about it. I just learn to see it as an opportunity and what makes me different, right? So when it comes to the whole model minority myths and any of the stereotypes that has been labeled on me, I just pay attention to it and use it to my advantage. And that's something to be conscious about. So that's how I would say the most important strategy that I've has been those three C's:
Yeah.
courage, communication, and commitment.
Courage, communication, commitment. I love that. And, something that you mentioned around speaking up about who you are, what you need, it's so important. So many of us were taught, keep your head down, just work hard and people notice. And guess what? That's not going to work in the professional space. You have to be able to speak up and ask for what you want, what you need, articulate what you're doing, who you are, what you stand for, all of that, because nobody else will.
Absolutely. And it's important to also, again, one of my biggest things is once you do that, going back to communication, sharing it broadly because there's other people behind you that's watching what you're doing. And part of the reason why I agreed to come to the panel because I know other people out there who has not spoken up, who has not pursued what they wanted. They might see this and say, I want to go after that.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, James. Patricia, Sue Ann, anything you want to add?
I have a cohort. One is a early career, 5 years or less. These are women, young professionals. And what I noticed, and you resonated what you said, James, about the courage and knowing what you want. And many times they're very good at advocating for other things and other people, but not for themselves. And then the second thing is to be consistently communicating what it is that you want. Some of them didn't know what they wanted. And so to figure out what that even is, I think is so important. And then to be able to communicate it, to your point, James. So all of that resonated for me.
And I just want to add one quick thing, which came from a personal experience of mine. And I was at a speaking event engagement, right? And 25, and it was for a BRG, an Asian focused BRG, business resource group. And a 25-year-old young man came up to me and said, I'm an analyst. I don't know if what I'm doing is what I want to keep doing, or if this is what my parents have expected of me, right? And we carry that, like you were talking about, James, we carry that culture with us. And I mean, I think he was really brave and really stepping up and questioning that. And speaking of what you said to James, like being part of panels like this, hopefully it reaches someone and it resonates with someone to just double down and consider that for themselves. You know, is this a path that I want? And hey, maybe it is a path that, you know, you might discover that in future, right? But there's a lot about our culture that we have to consider for ourselves, but also, you know, take as an opportunity for us to grow into the next step of who we are.
Yeah, I love that you bring up the parents piece. You know, my whole book and my journey was around getting to know my parents and kind of detangling who am I and what were my parents' expectations. And it was so interesting because I had a conversation about my parents wanted me to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer. I did not do that. I ended up doing marketing on the food team at Google. And when I spoke to my parents about this, they said, you know, we taught you based on what we knew back in the day. How would we ever know that one day books would be sold on the line? My dad said on the line, you know, and it would become Amazon. Or how did we know that, you know, you could be a marketer of food at Google? We didn't know these things. And so even though we had these expectations, it's also taking it with a grain of salt that we gave you that advice based on our knowledge and things are different now. And so have that freedom to make your own choices. And it was very liberating when my dad said that to me. So yeah. And something else that they often encourage us to do is prioritize community, right? So Sue Ann, I have a question for you around community advocacy and organizing. Grassroots organizing and community activism play a critical role in addressing systemic issues. What are some successful advocacy efforts that have made a tangible impact? And how can individuals get involved in supporting Asian American communities?
This is such a great question and a big one. So the Center for Asian Pacific American Women is one of many organizations that belong to the National Council of Asian Pacific Americans, which is a national organization that mobilizes AAP and NHPI organizations. And I do want to have a notation here about the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander brothers and sisters, because a lot of times they kind of get forgotten and they get kind of lumped in with Asian Americans. And I think having that is very important because number one is whether it's making sure at the national level we have representation in Washington, D.C., or if we're talking about voting and mobilizing voting registrations. I just had a conversation with Christine Chen at APIA Vote the other day, and I said, okay, so where do we go from here? You know, what are we working on? And you know, there are policy aspects that we need to focus on for our communities. There, you know, things like immigration and SAVE Act and other things. But then there's also, from my perspective, advocating for, you know, leadership development because we still have, you know, a disparity. So if you look at, as an example, the data, you know, if you look at McKinsey's study with Lean In with the Women in the Workplace 2024 report, you know, we're still at 1 in 4 women, 1 in 20 to 25 women of color, and 1 in 50 AAPI women in C-suite. So Patricia beat the odds, you know, being 1 in 50 and being a executive. You know, so to me, there's really a lot of work from getting our, you know, AA and HPI brothers and sisters up, lifting them up, and also from a community perspective, policy work that really does need to be worked on and looked at. Turning out the vote is an important piece. Georgia was a good example. We turned out the vote for our elections. Now this year, or this past year, I think it was, you know, more of a struggle, but we still engaged. You know, how do we get people to, you know, register? That's the biggest thing. Not telling them vote Democrat or Republican or any other. It's not a party issue. It's about engaging in the voting process. You know, when I look at the number of AAPI in legislature in Georgia, amazing. You know, we got pretty good representation in Georgia. You know, Representative Sam Park and others who really, you know, do a lot to look out for AAPI advocacy. and a lot of the work that needs to be done at that grassroots level. So those are some examples, I would say, from a political perspective, representation, leadership representation within the Fortune 50, Fortune 500. And I actually had a conversation with the president and CEO of one of the Fortune 10 companies. And I asked the question, your cabinet does not have any AA and HPI women or any women of color. What are we doing? You know, you're in the top 10. What are we doing for representation? You can't tell me you can't find them out there, right? We have a lot of qualified individuals out there. It's a matter of where do you find them? So these are the questions we have to ask. So those are some examples. I'm sure my partners have other thoughts, but that's my experience so far.
Thank you, Sue Ann. And you know, I to your point about getting folks to just register and get out there to vote, I just had a conversation this past weekend with some folks who are a little older in the Asian community, and they basically said, well, my vote doesn't really matter. It's not going to change things, right? So how do you help them to understand actually it does, and every single person's vote matters, and why should you go out there to vote? Yeah.
And I would jump in saying that when you think about communities and how you want to contribute, you're not limited to any space, right? Some, as you mentioned, Sue, there's of course politics and having the ability to have a voice. You mentioned learning and development. There's so many areas that you can volunteer and support, that, like in healthcare and areas of that nature. You can contribute to professional organizations. You can support so many community areas. So go with where your passion's in, right? If your passion is in politics, go for that activism in that space. If it is leadership, for example, I support NAP, National Association of Asian American Professionals. I serve on the board for another organization that specifically focuses on youth, Asian American Dream, that specializes on basically low income, first generation, FAFSA qualified based students who didn't have the parents that can advise them and getting into college and otherwise. So there is so many different opportunities for you to really volunteer and again align to your values, your interests. Just go out there and join the community is the most important piece.
Thank you. Goes back to what you were saying earlier, right? Who are you? What matters to you? What do you want? What do you need? And communicate it and commit. Yeah. Patricia, anything else that you want to add?
I second all of that too. And I think one additional thing that we all can do, right, on an everyday basis is to try to support even like local businesses, local restaurants. Food is a passion of mine, so leaning into my passion, James, right? That's something that I will particularly look out for. And, frequently people ask me, hey, where should we go for X, Y, or Z, right? And actually, with the recent Ascend event, I had recommended a Southeast Asian restaurant that's here in Chicago. And I'm like, hey, I'm originally from Singapore. Like, you got to support these guys, So just small things like that do make a difference.
Yeah, it's little things. Sue Ann?
Absolutely. Let me add two more things. And Patricia,
Yeah.
you triggered something for me. National ACE. And the fact that they do tremendous work around like microloans and grants. And I'm actually I have an MOU we do with National ACE specifically for Atlanta as an example. And, we've given out, to survive after COVID, these Chinese restaurants, Asian restaurants who are getting targeted, we gave money and funding, right, to these restaurants that they didn't have to give back, right? So that's huge. And then elder care, I wanted to mention elder care. It's tough. I just went through a whole situation with my own parents with elder care. So I'm very involved with ARP Georgia. And I'm telling you, our elders need help and assistance just for the basic functions. So that's another area where you can help and support. So I wanted to mention those two things as well.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is lots of opportunities, lean into your values, the things that matter to you, and just go out there. Every little thing can contribute and help the community. Yeah. Patricia, so Media representation. Asian American voices have historically been underrepresented, whether that's literature, media, public discourse. How does storytelling and representation shape identity, and what role do authors, creators play in reclaiming these narratives about the Asian American experience?
Yeah, I think it's twofold actually. So one is what you see as an ANHPI person shapes your identity, but also what does everybody else around the US see about ANHPI people, right? So a Nielsen study a couple of years ago, we looked at the Asian representation in the top 10 most watched programs in the US. And not surprisingly, a lot of them were police procedurals like Chicago PD, Chicago Fire, Grey's Anatomy, right? Where a lot of the roles that people see are things like the FBI analyst, the doctor, the lawyer, right? The things that we are frequently associated with as part of the model minority myth. So having that as a baseline and understanding that this is why people have these labels or perceptions about us is one area, right? But thank goodness for streaming, because streaming has helped to diversify the sources of those stories and where people are watching and where people are seeing Asian Americans, right? In fact, streaming is the one platform that there is a higher representation of ANHPI compared to the total population. We are 6% of the population. Streaming representation stands at about 10 to 12% over the last 3 years. And there is definitely a lot more that's coming in because guess what? Things like Squid Game, right? Um, I can't remember, like, what's it, Falling Into You. Some of those K-dramas are really drawing audiences that are not just Asian stories for Asians, but also the broader US population. And that speaks to the increasing influence of ANHPI across US culture, right? But ultimately, for change to happen, and we've had these discussions with the storytellers, the filmmakers, and so forth, honestly, they're kind of frustrated because, sure, the data's out there, but nobody's green lighting. No, well, I wouldn't say nobody. There is still a need to accelerate the green lighting of projects that are representative, and also for advertisers to invest in content where there is representation, right? And ultimately, that change and that shift happens where there is a return on investment, right? Where we can show that there is value in investing in the content or the advertising that is placed in content that is representative of our community. So, Earth Month, right, is happening right now. So we just did this study where we found it. Nielsen study found that 56% of ANHPI women, going back to what you said, Sue-Ann, expect the brands they buy to support the causes they care about, right? And when we did a deeper dive on this, the young Asian millennial women, right, is 84% more likely to buy eco-friendly products than the general population. Sorry, you're going to hear a lot of data from me. And so this clearly says to brands which have eco-friendly lines, and there's a lot of them out there, right? That this is an opportunity to build trust and engage this eco-conscious group who are just at the beginning of their growing buying power too, right? And guess what? The ANHPI millennial women don't just influence the brands, they also influence peers. So 36% of them agree that they are considered the leader in trends. Not surprising. Um, although I'm like, well, I should have been younger, I could have been one of these influencers. But this influence extends to, purchasing power as their choices when it comes to these eco-friendly products, right? Is hopefully helping to shape what their peers are buying, right? And to me, this is an opportunity and this is an information piece for brands that when you align these values with this powerful network of Asian millennial women, this is an opportunity for you to grow and engage and build that relationship and that level of trust with a growing consumer base. So, creators and storytellers do have that responsibility. Brands and the sources of investment for these stories and advertising also have the opportunity, but because it makes business sense, not just because there's representation and therefore we need to drive that representation.
I love all the data you're providing because it shows there's a business case for this. It isn't just a nice to have, right? It's a business case.
I actually want to highlight something too. When we talk about the buying power as well as influence of this community, I also want to make sure when from a narrative perspective, also pay homage the fact that we're not a monolithic group. Okay, I want to call that out just because, again, if marketers or organizations are trying to develop strategies around that, understand you need to understand the culture too. That there is different types of Asians, as highlighted earlier. So when you're thinking of that, it's more opportunity. The more you understand the community, the more opportunity you're going to have. Because again, last thing you want is to have a faux pas of anything where you address it the wrong way to the wrong group. So I want to make sure it's an and approach. Yes, there's the Asian community as a whole, but then there's also the fact that each one of us in different cultures and backgrounds and approach has different values to bring to the table. So I want to make sure I bring that up as well when we think about how to tackle this.
100%. Yeah.
I love that. And by the way, I actually learned better Korean through K-drama. I just want to, my third grade level of Korean improved by watching K-drama. And by the way, I loved it. And so one of the things that I was curious about is like the influence of AI in marketing, and how does that integrate into what you're seeing, if at all?
So AI right now is in the, I would say, in the shaping level, right? And that means people are still trying to figure out how to feed it the data that is going to produce accurate, the best types of information that is representative. And this is, again, an opportunity, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Let's reduce that garbage and have the people who are the engineers out there, right? This is an opportunity for you to step in and say, okay, if we're going to be really using AI, let's not just take it for granted and use it for, use it for what you're doing just at your personal level. But let's really level up and think about, okay, if we're going to be asking it questions, like for me, for example, in communications, right? I'm putting in questions and prompts that are more general right now, just to learn to see what it's doing, and the different like ChatGPT versus your Google Gemini is producing different results. Just play around with it. It's really interesting. So the more you're contributing to it on a personal level, the better you're creating those models to be. There's a lot of play that's going around with creativity too, in terms of like, here's make me an ad that represents, Asians, right? And who are playing with their family members, for example. And it's really interesting because we are seeing things like that's not really accurate, that there's a tendency to skew towards fairer skin tones, even though, to your point that you brought up, James, there's such a diversity of Asians. And I do this too whenever we've done reports with Nielsen, right? We make sure that there is a representation just from the photos you're seeing in a report, that we have everybody who is East Asian, South Asian, people who are, wearing hijabs, to Sikh turbans. I mean, all those things have to be representative. And that is what AI is scraping, right? When they're going out there to pull the data to produce the results that you're looking for. I hope that helps, Suen.
It's fascinating. And I wonder, Patricia, maybe you might have some thoughts on this, but what can we do to help? You said garbage in, garbage out. What is it that we could do as individuals and as a community so that there's no garbage in?
So I think one of the things that I find has been helping is if I'm feeding it, right, the prompts itself. So that is on a personal level, day to day, something that we can do. So, like you have to do it like 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 times to get it to a place where you feel, okay, that is right. And our data also shows that, a lot of Asians feel that the representation where we are being seen isn't accurate. So that's where knowing that and feeling that, and then using what you're doing with AI on a daily basis to try to correct for some of that, will help the AI engines. This is me being positive. I am not a coder by any means, but I do find, just from my personal experience, the more I feed it that information, right, the better it does become. Like the end product that I finally end up with is much better.
So I would love to lean in on this a little bit, because one of the things that there's a false assumption that you have to be an engineer to contribute to this, and that is a very false narrative. Because one of the things that I've, like, as an HR professional, I do DEI work. I actually serve on our internal company's AI committee, bringing attention to the human aspects of it, the ethics aspect of it, to how we do AI in an ethical way. I consult externally with other organizations who are leveraging AI and having to give them a different perspective on what needs to be added. So I would say, no matter where you are, or background or otherwise, if you contributing is the data that needs to go in, and that's the key. So be a participant, don't just be the consumer when it comes to AI. And again, what they model is based on what we do. And that's critical when it comes to shaping this for the future. Because one of my biggest fears, and I always tell my my partners, is it's going to generally go after what is the most popular or the most active, or the algorithm is going to go after what is most prominent. So if we don't create a fair number of data points for it, the system will never be able to grasp it. So, and I should say I'm an engineer by trade originally, so I actually did do the parent thing of being an engineer. So been there, done that. So just insight on anyone can participate.
Love that. And I'm a comp sci back in the day. Nobody would ever guess. They're like, really? Yes. Quite possibly parental pressures.
I think let me add one quick thing too, James. You just reminded me of something. I think when you are getting those results from whatever platform you are using, double check it, right? This is a little bit of the mis and disinformation that we worked through when we were just starting to look at social media. You know, double check it. I mean, sure, it's coming up with interesting stuff, but when it spews out a data point, check it out and just do a straight up, look at a different, like if you were using Google, check it out on DuckDuckGo, for example, right? Just a different search engine to see what that search engine is coming up with. So you're reducing some of that garbage.
Yeah, 'cause it's based on what people are putting in.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. So I want to open it up to the audience, see if there are any audience questions. I don't see any. So if anyone wants to put in questions, be sure to do it in the Q&A. And I still have a whole bunch of questions, so we could keep going with mine, and we'll check with the Q&A again shortly. So let's see, James. Let's talk about workplace and diversity leadership. So, as the role of Chief Diversity Officer continues to evolve, what are some of the biggest challenges in advancing workplace equity? And how can companies move beyond this performative allyship?
So first and foremost, I would say there's always multiple areas of challenges that's impacting the work. Right now in US, we have the political landscape, one easy example, right? In the other unique perspective is, if you're in a global organization, there's different countries with different rules and different regulations. So I always tell people, when it comes to this work, it's about the outcome that you're pursuing, right? Fundamentally, if DEI is done right, it's a betterment for the entire organization and community. So again, one of my biggest thing I tell people is, one, make sure your definition of DEI is something that is inclusive. That's important. When it comes to the strategy and work that you're doing, make sure it's not a silo. It is integrated to whatever the organization is doing, and it brings in as many people as possible to the work. And that's something that I would say within my organization, I've been honored to be able to do here, was basically create a specific narrative around DEI where people were jumping in whenever they wanted, and they were feeling that they're an active player in the space. So when it comes to this role and how those challenges externally, if you own the narrative, you give clear, consistent, concise, again, directions, vision, communication, and opportunity, people will lean in because it gives them a place to focus on. So I would always say to people, be clear when it comes to your strategy. Make sure it's inclusive. how it is where anyone can participate. Allies are critical in driving what we need to move forward. And another component, again, tie it into what the organization, whether you're corporate America, whether you're nonprofit, whatever, make sure it aligns to the organization's values, priorities, and vision. Because if it's tied in, it's hard to separate. That's one of those things. Because if you make it into silos, that's when things disappear.
Really integrating all of it into the business. Yeah.
Correct.
Sue Ann.
Can I add something to that? James, you're making me think about all of my conversations I've had with my sponsors in the last probably month. And the fact that, just checking in and finding out from a lot of different companies, where are they with their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts? What are they sensitive to? What are they getting pushback on? And to your point, the value proposition is key, definitely. I do have to, one of the things that's consistently coming out is the languaging in terms of how you refer to your programs, or how you refer to, like, if you're particularly targeting a group of people. And I kind of looked at that and I thought to myself, at the end of the day, what are we really doing? We're developing people. We are, providing, we're talking about wage gap. We're talking about elder care. That could apply to many people, many communities. The cultural acumen is different. The overlay of the specific culture is nuanced, but the issue itself is universal. And I think that's what we have to continue to talk about in being inclusive. And then the other thing is, I'm just going to give a very practical example. I'm doing a presentation in May to a Fortune 50 company. And in my PowerPoint, I had the word microaggression and I had to remove it. And that, that's a good example of their sensitivity around the languaging piece and the fact that we have to be more mindful of what that means. So I had to repackage that, which is fine. I can talk about it differently. But at the end of the day, from my perspective, the issues don't go away just because you rename it. Right? So, but glad to rename if that's what it takes. So I wanted to add those pieces.
It's definitely about the outcome. What is the outcome you're pursuing, right? And I'm going to make a shameless plug that, hey, you've got partners. Lean on the community. And hey, you're here for Diversity MBA. Lean on Diversity MBA, right? They've got research, they've got data, they got best practices. Lean on any of us here. We're here to support each other as a community.
Yeah.
Yeah, so not to add one thing as well from an external like client languaging perspective too, right? Like instead of calling it diverse audiences, right? We talk about growth segments because that's what Nielsen's always done. Nielsen's always pushed the fact that that our communities are where the fastest growth is coming from, right? The highest buying power, 1.4 trillion for the Asian American group. In terms of population growth, we are the fastest growing segment in the country. If you are trying to grow your business, you got to go after that group. It's just that, it's something that a wise business does, looking at growth segments. So that's the outcome you're looking for, growth. Therefore, look after the segments that you want to grow with.
Thank you, Patricia. And I run these DEI roundtables, and one of the things that came out from it was also the fact, similar to what you were saying, Patricia, is how do we reclaim that narrative? And it doesn't matter what we call it, but it's the narrative. There's so much misconception that's been fueling the resistance, and people hear these DEI and they automatically have this like emotion to it. So it's how do we take back the narrative and effectively communicate the value to reclaim the mission at scale, so that people aren't just hearing the word and thinking, oh, it's that thing, right? And to your point, James, it's really about DEI can no longer be the standalone initiative. It needs to be woven into businesses with clear, measurable ROI tied to the businesses, and that's really to demonstrate the tangible impacts of it. Yeah, 100%. So I see a question, and this is, how do each of you feel about being grouped under one reference as Asian, and how should we ask which group you are in without offending? Anyone want to take the lead on that?
Actually, I'll jump on this one just because I address it quite often. It's not about the question, it's about your approach, honestly. So my thing is, I always tell people, just be upfront and say, hey, I've got a question, don't take offense. I'm just in a space of curiosity. Then ask the question, right? Open that vulnerability. People will be more vulnerable to you. So again, lead with the intent first and context, then you can ask the question without fear.
I would totally agree with that. And I'm fortunate that I have an interesting last name. So people often ask me the question, where does your last name come from? You know, and I'm like, well, that's not something to take offense at. I perceive that as intentional curiosity, right? You want to learn about people at the end of the day. And I actually appreciate it when people ask me that question.
And I would say that we talk a lot about in my cohort about identity, and that actually is a very personal thing. Yes, we're grouped under the broader umbrella of Asian, but I personally, as an example, consider myself Korean American first as my identity. Then other things come after that. But I think it is a personal question. And when you ask even another Korean, how do they identify themselves? It'll be different than me. So I think it is a personalized experience type of a question, but I love the fact that you're asking the question and asking from a place of wanting to learn. And I think if people know that, they're very open to it, but not when I'm sitting at, standing in Walmart and somebody comes up to me and says, hey, you speak great English. Are you from this country? That is not what I'm talking about. So, and that's happened to me. So that's an example of what not to do, but from a place of curiosity, compassion, and learning.
And there's the genuine curiosity, right? Yeah. Awesome. So Patricia, let's talk about financial literacy and access. Financial security is really, it's a crucial aspect of empowerment, yet many in the AANHPI communities, particularly immigrants and first-gen individuals, they face barriers to financial education, wealth building opportunities. What are some common financial challenges you've observed, and what steps can be taken to improve financial literacy and access?
So I think my colleagues here would probably have a lot more to say about this because I am not a financial expert, and I preface that by saying that also I'm just speaking from personal experience, and I would say that a lot of the time people like think, oh, she knows what she's doing with her money, right? And especially as I've gotten ahead in my career too. And I did look up some data points to support this question, Amy, before we came here. And Fidelity, which is the provider for the 401k for my throughout most of my career, right? They just did the study that showed Asians have a high level of savings, like more so than any other population. I'm like, well, that's probably true. And I will think that that is also because of where we are. A lot of the time where we have better education, right? But then it made me wonder, like for me personally, I came late to the game with really understanding and doubling down on my personal financial education. Only 17% of API individuals in that Fidelity survey said that they actually work with a financial advisor. So I think that's one thing. If you don't have a financial advisor of some sort, go get one, right? And I've been blessed, particularly with my the companies that I've worked with, because most of them do have some kind of financial wellness and support. The other thing also is from that survey that was truly reflective of my experience, and Suan, your experience too with parents, right? There's a lot of ANHPI individuals living in multi-generational households, and having that family focus and being prepared to address that in your later life or in your parents' later life is a very important aspect of how you plan for your financial future as well. And AARP is a tremendous source for that. And just having that, I think there's also this idea of, you have to take care of your parents. I mean, maybe some more so for us and for my friends too, who are Asian, they always worry and wonder about that. And I think the other aspect that is important for those of us who are in corporate roles, right? Having career growth is an important aspect of educating yourself about where you expect to grow in your career and what kind of financial growth that brings. The bamboo ceiling is something that we're often confronted with. And very, very few leaders look like us, right, when it comes to leadership in corporate America. API Data did this study where, despite being the fastest growing population, only 6% of executives are in HPI, right? Supporting what you were talking about, Swen, for the numbers are even worse for Asian women, right? So I think the conversations like this, having organizations like Kapal with Suan, the Asian American Foundation, where we are focused on increasing awareness, but also pay it forward is the first step, right? But I would say that I think having that goal, having that understanding of where you yourself want to go as a person, is the first step, and then figuring out the money plan behind it, okay, would be the next step.
For me, I would definitely say it's a journey. No, and it's not one single path. So different approaches, different style, different needs. So first and foremost, I would definitely focus on saying be willing and open to just learn. Financial literacy is it's a continuous learning path. You're not going to listen to just one source, and don't limit yourself to one source. It's important to be diversify your knowledge when it comes to the space. I came from a socioeconomically challenged family, immigrant parents who did not have the advanced knowledge when it comes to any of this, but they were amazing savers. Funny thing, Patricia, is you say that, right? And I'm in in the fact that I also am in the similar culture of where my parents depend on me, and things of that nature. So again, it's important to just be willing to learn and adapt when it comes to ways to tackle finance. Another component is you're not going to always be on point. You're not always going to be perfect in any of this, right? Things change, the economy changes. Just be willing and again, take advice from others, review, learn, and take it from anywhere too, anywhere that you can gain access. Like internally in my organization, one of our employee resource groups, our Young Professional Network, actually teaches financial literacy when it comes to corporate components, like how to listen to an earnings call, how to what does stock look like when you're receiving one, and stuff like that. You there's so many areas to learn from. Just be willing and stay open to it.
I love that. I'm going to share three things that triggered for me. Number one is definition of family, because that affects the way you build wealth. In the traditional sense in the US, it's mom, dad, kids. That is not our definition. A lot of times in our household, auntie, uncle, grandma, grandpa, everybody and their cousin. Well, that's different in terms of wealth building. And then who contributes to whether that child goes to college or whether or not we build a business together. So from a perspective of building a business and that financial well-being, or personal wealth building, right? They're two different aspects, but still wealth building. So one of the things that I think is very important is leverage, like resources that are out there, like, National ACE or ACE Next Gen for young professionals that are coming out, want to learn about your business. And how do you get those government contracts? How do you really get yourself prepared financially? How do you get a professional financial statement? Last year, we did a financial literacy session with the Pacific Islander community out in Salt Lake. And they're like, Sue-Ann, we need the most basic form of a business plan, like a one-pager. Please don't give us anything complicated. Give us something we can actually do something with, and they'll actually take action. That's the basic level we have to start at. So that's one aspect. The other thing is language barrier. You know what? Sometimes you have to have a financial advisor who speaks the language, because these are immigrants. English is not their first language, and that can be challenging. So that's one of the things. I have a friend of mine who specializes specifically in the Chinese community in Atlanta, And also she focuses on women because she said a lot of times the husband will show up and the wife doesn't in the AAPI community. So the literacy is not there for the women. And so she encourages the wife to also attend the session. So these are subtle cultural things you have to understand in order to even get to the family. And then finally, if you get one family member, likely, you know how we are. We like to say, hey, cousin, come over here. Use this person. You know, I'm going to bring my entire family to this person because guess what? I trust them. And that's exactly, we have a financial that took the whole family, me, mom, dad, everybody, because we trust that person. And that was referred to us personally. That matters in our culture.
But yeah, and you know what I'm hearing a lot is these external things that, you know, like the literacy and learning and going out there. You know, through my work with a lot of individuals, there's also this mindset piece, right? So many of us grow up with a scarcity mindset or security over growth. Save the money, don't invest, don't put it into anything risky, or money is something to protect, not necessarily leverage. And there's also a lot of fear of losing money, right? And instead of investing in it for these big returns. And even in some communities and households, there's a stigma to even talk about money. And so you know, there's two pieces. There's the external, like, let's go learn about money. Let's go understand it, its function. And then it's, what are these beliefs and these mindsets that I have that I need to move through? And I know personally for me, I used to save as much as I could. When I worked at Google, I would take a bus everywhere. And my mom got on my case. She was like, it is midnight. You're not taking a bus. Pay for the Uber. You know, and this is my mother. She was yelling at me. She's like, you work at Google. Take an Uber. Stop saving the pennies, you know? And so it's something that I had to proactively work on for myself. Like, oh, I can spend the money on the thing, you know, and actually go enjoy all the hard work that I put in.
Amy, it's funny you said about the parents and component of it. Like something that triggered when you said, like, I would say for my family, I mean, I don't know about yours, but I talking about money was never shy from our parents. I don't know. My son makes this, like, I'm like, that's why I don't tell you how much I make. Uh, so I don't know about that, but it's one of those things I do recognize that, again, us talking about money should be normal,
Yeah.
right? Giving advice, sharing should be normal. The goal is to improve and support each other at the end of the day.
And Sue says my mom was the same. See, and this also shows that there are so many differences even within the community, right? There's no one set of instructions for how to interact and engage in the cultural nuances. Yeah. So there's a question in the chat, Sue-Ann, can you expand on how elder care needs intersect with cultural demands and how that relationship can be improved upon?
I can't speak for all Asian Americans, but I can say for my family, it's the eldest, right, who was expected to take care of the parents. And by the way, I'm the only kid. So I'm the oldest and the only. James is like, yes, me too. And I think that my parents were, I would say, pretty liberal for them because they worked in this country professionally for a long time. And so they actually determined their own path in terms of how they wanted to handle their own care going to a home and versus me having to take care of them at home myself, because sometimes that is the expectation that you don't want to be they don't want to be put in a home. You're expected to take care of them. You're expected to handle all of the duties and responsibilities. And by the way, I mean, from a personal experience, it is very expensive to be in senior living facility and especially memory care. So I think there's this cultural expectation of what a child is supposed to do to take care of the parents, number one, taking care of their affairs, doctor's appointments and all that. And I had support and I still struggled. And I'm thinking in my mind, those who don't have the resources, how do we help? How do we support? And this is where I think the AARP really can help, and resources like that. I had no idea what hospice offered until recently in terms of care, and just educating ourselves on what's even out there to help. My mom was 100 pounds, and when she can't give the effort, I could hardly lift her. So I think these are the things to me that are very important. Is what are the issues that we face when we're maybe the sole caregiver? Number two, the expectation and the mental stress sometimes that we put on ourselves because it is expected. And number three is it's unpaid work, which contributes, right, and it's mostly women. Not that men don't do it, but it is mostly women, from a caregiver perspective. And it is an economic issue. So those are some of the things that I see, where I see the caregiving. I know of people who are taking care of their grandparents, not just their parent, but their grandparents. And so I think or spouses even. So this is where I feel like we really need to focus our attention on some of these communities. They can't afford caregiving. It's just not doable. So we have to do it ourselves. So what can we do? So that's kind of, when I think about caregiving, those are some of the things that come to my mind.
Thank you, Sue-Ann. And I know we're at the top of the hour, so I want to leave everyone with a call to action. Based on your expertise, what is one action everyone in this room can do to uplift, support Asian individuals in their respective communities or professions? And Sue-Ann, maybe you can start.
There are so many organizations. If you look at NCAP, NCAPA, there is a whole host of Asian organizations you can support. Plus there's NAP, James mentioned, right? Ascend, Patricia mentioned. And by the way, one of the things that I also do is support Asian entrepreneurs. So when you're hiring, look at entrepreneurs who are AA and HPI. Don't forget your NHPI partners. So I would say get educated. Your talent, time, funding, any of those things that you want to contribute.
James or Patricia?
I'll say I go back to my original three, right? Be courageous. Again, go for it, right? Whatever it is that you want, what do you have passions for? Communicate, communicate, communicate. Only way we're going to break through all the stigma, all the challenges, and otherwise, we've got to share, talk, let people know, right? And then at the end of the day, follow through, commit. Whatever you're going to do, commit. How you show up is important.
I think where we are today, right? It's discouraging. Let's just put it out there. I have a tough time getting up every morning and they're like, oh my gosh, what is today going to bring? But I think one thing that I'm also a Catholic, so I always feel like, all right, there is going to be a better day. That is the promise of tomorrow. Easter's coming, hey. But don't lose courage, and there's always something that we can each do for ourselves, number one, for our community from where we are. It doesn't have to be something big, but it takes all of us doing something small every single day to make that change happen and to make representation happen, and to drive that awareness across the board.
Thank you. And I will say just spread kindness, right? The world needs more of that today more than anything. So spreading love and kindness, each of us doing that can make such a difference. So thank you to the amazing panelists. You are all amazing. Thank you, Pam and Diversity MBA for creating this space. And thank you everyone for joining on this call. Hope you took some good nuggets away. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you, Amy, our host. Once again, this recording will be available on YouTube, and our next panel will be on June 26th, LGBTQIA in America. Thank you, everyone.